Okay, thank you, Ido. Now let's enter our second day of the workshop. In our preliminary discussions, Ido emphasized our interdisciplinary approach at this conference, and that's the reason why I'm particularly happy to be able to introduce Gabriel Weimann now, because he is a distinguished scholar in the field of political communication, and he will give us an input from a social science perspective on our topic. For those who do not know Gabriel Weimann in detail, he is Professor Emeritus at Haifa University. He holds position at the Interdisciplinary Center in Herzliya and at the University of Maryland, and is generally internationally well-connected researcher. I know that you spent some time in Germany as well, at the University of Mainz, and have tight connections to University of Munich. And you are known in our field as an expert in the field of political communication with an emphasis on media and terrorism. And yeah, we are now happy to hear your keynote on our issue. We have about 1 hour time. I'll keep an eye on the clock and will moderate the discussion. So, Gabriel, the floor is yours.
Do you see my presentation?
Not yet.
Just a sec.
Now it's coming, yeah.
Okay, good morning, Boker Tov, guten Morgen. Professor Emmer, vielen Dank für Ihre Vorstellung. I will use my 40 minutes, no more, to take you for a trip into the online virus of hate. It will be a very fast-moving trip. I have a lot to show, so excuse me for the speed. There will be many videos, pictures, presentations moving, but I really hope to introduce another angle to the study of hate speech, and this is the perspective of communication scholars. Now, if you are interested in looking into our study, our findings, there are several publications. One of them is actually the title of this lecture. At the end of my presentation, there will be my email. You can email me and I will send you every publication you might be interested in. Now, let me first say that we are dealing with far-right extremism. I will use the short term Freie, which is today considered as the biggest threat to democracy, more than any terrorist group, more than any other extremist organization. Now, what is really the Freie? There's no clear definition. The reason for that is that this is an umbrella term covering all kinds of extreme ideologies that may involve fascism, neo-Nazism, anti-black, anti-women, anti-gay, anti-Muslim, anti-Jewish, anti-immigrants, and so on. So it involves what I will later call the fusion of hate. But before taking you there, let me give you an example of what we call online hate, because I will focus today on online platform. Later I'll explain why. So let me take you to the whitepower.org website, and it's not a downloaded. I will open it live now. So you can see how it will take a second. A neo-Nazi website opens up today live on the net. So this is the opening page, and I will just skip down because we had Christmas days. So they had Christmas presents. Now you may have a look at one. They suggest a neo-Nazi website, open for all, not regulated, not censored, white power. So you see the swastika, you see the uniforms, and if I keep going on, you can see that they collect money to build a house in the US, and they combine all kinds of hate groups. It's not just neo-Nazi. You have here white extremists, white pride, anti-Semitic groups. You can donate. And if you look at the picture, it's taken from old Second World War Nazi propaganda with the Aryan girl. You can contribute to the school. Jew Watch. By the way, you have many short terms here, many codes used in this presentation. If you see the 666, or if you see Z or G, it's all code words, either for the Zionist control of the world, the Satan connected to the Jews, 666. I will talk about it later. It's all there. And if you really want to go into the group, you can actually open a link to their books they sell online, White Power. You can go to events that they organize. It's all live, not under construction now. You can read the news according to the view of this group. And you can see that they open to all the links of all of these are links. I will later show you what the Der Lichtturmer, which is the modern version of the Stürmer, the Nazi time. So it all opens up, and I just wanted to show you that you can join various groups, organizations, all of them linked to this coalition of hate. All of these are either in Britain, in US, in Europe. You can download leaflets. You can join social media. Well, this is just an example. And I guess you go back to, and I wanted to show you live what can be accessed online when we speak about the virus of hate. This is the virus of hate. And let me explain that this relates to our ongoing project on extremism and terrorism. We actually explore what we call the dark side of the internet. Now, for many years, we focused on terrorism. The project started in 1998. I was a lot younger, and that was 32 years ago. And since then, we monitor terrorism and extremism online. It includes over 9,800 websites and all social media. We have a huge archive, and it's funded, as you can see, by various organizations, foundations, and grants, including in the US, Germany, Canada, Australia, and so on. Excuse me. All our publications are online, books, in special reports, in manuscripts, and most of them are accessible online. Now, for many years, we left the issue of hate speech and far-right extremism out of our range because our funding was limited usually to the study of terrorism. Nevertheless, in the recent years, we didn't change, they changed. And far-right extremism became violent and actually entered our definition of political violent groups. As a result, we started monitoring not only terrorist groups, but also far-right extremist groups involved in the use of violence. And as you'll see, almost all of them today can be defined as terrorism. All of them are not just political extremist ideologies, but also preach for violence, seduce other to use violence and use violence themselves. Now, far-right extremism is on the rise. It's very clear. And if you look at this diagram, just look at the light blue column, at the share of far-right extremism from 1994 to 2020. And you see, you don't need to read the numbers, just look at the relative share, the proportion of the light blue. This is far-right terrorism. And you can see that it's growing and growing, while other types of terrorism are declining. If we look just at the US, we can see this diagram of rise. And in Europe, look at the blue line. The fatality in red line doesn't change a lot, but the amount of attacks is certainly on the rise all over the world. Now, for us, communication scholars, when we look at far-right extremism, we try to study the media strategy, how they use the media. And we certainly can distinguish four elements. First, they are building their own media empire, and especially online. And I'll take you in a minute to the examples. The way I showed you before, that was just one example. They use the media presence in order to spread disinformation, doubt, anxiety, fear, and even anarchy. Remember 6th of January last year. They use the media and the special media that they own and operate to defame the critics, to attack the critics. They use social media as amplifier for the messages. You'll see a lot of examples in a second. And they also try to stretch the limits of freedom of speech, arguing that they should be allowed to preach freely because they are protected with the liberal principles of freedom of speech, freedom of communication. Now, they use more than any other platform, they use online platforms, because online platforms, let them be social media, let them be websites, easily accessed. Nobody can control them. Nobody can censor them. They have huge audiences worldwide, and especially young people who are a preferred target audience for them. They can enjoy anonymity. That is, they can spread the information and the disinformation and preach for violence without being identified. It's almost impossible to find them. It's a very fast flow of information and communication. It's interactive. They can communicate with the audiences. It's very cheap to establish and maintain, and they can even use it for multimedia purposes, that is, spread print, sound, photos, videos, and so on. So no wonder that far-right extremists started migrating to cyberspace. They noted they are aware of all these advantages, and they moved their communications, propaganda, instructions, training, coordination to cyberspace. And they use it for various purposes, exactly the way terrorist groups have been doing since the late 90s. To launch psychological warfare campaigns, to spread information, disinformation as a propaganda campaign, to network among themselves, who have information, how they communicated on social media, to orchestrate and coordinate the attack on many groups participated. In 6th of January on Capitol Hill, networking was done online. They use it to seduce people, to attract new people, to recruit people, indoctrinate and radicalize them, and mobilize them. They use it also to raise funds, you saw the earlier example, and even to train people how to use online platforms, how to train themselves with weapons and so on. So they are actually using all the social media that you are aware of, and maybe even some that you don't know. I bet that all of you know Twitter, Facebook, Google, YouTube, Instagram, and so on. Few of you probably know 8chan and 4chan and Parler. the newest platforms used by them. So they are not just using social media, they migrate within social media to those that are, let's say, now under pressure to remove them, to platforms which are more liberal, more open, and less regulated, like 8chan, 4chan, Parler, and others. So what are they posting there? And of course, we have a huge database, I would say thousands of examples that we downloaded from online platforms. I would give you just a few examples as illustrative examples. So basically what they do there, and these are just examples from some of the postings they post online. The language, of course, is aggressive, is violent, is seductive, and full of hate. So if you look at the bottom left, I hate, and you can see the coalition of hatreds, as we call it, the fusion of hate. So they hate race traitors, they hate faggots, nickname they used to for the homosexual community, niggers, the blacks, kikes. But you see, all these names are the codes they used to name. Kikes is used for the Jews. You can see that they suggest openly to use violence, hunt niggers, and it's all about hate. It's all about hating somebody, and very often hating more than one group, but a coalition of hate. If you look at the left, bottom left, one example, and you can see the flag of the homosexual community, which is of course a target for hate and violence, but also behind it, the cartoon of the Jewish face, Second World War style, Goebbels style. So you can see that they are combining hate of various groups. The language is very aggressive and very violent, and very often full with disinformation. Even the old style, Jews raped kids, up on left, we will rise again, calls for violence, take pigs to the slaughterhouse. It's all from various groups. Many of them are interconnected, the network of hate. Use of violence is very clear. I mean, if you see we know the symbols of these groups, and this is the white pride that we already saw before. And you see the hanging rope, which was, by the way, presented also in front of Capitol Hill on 6th of January last year. So that they really mean it. And as you see, it's not just words. They also kill people, but that will come later. You can see that they preach to young children. In this case, start bullying early and often, and the target is very often the homosexuals. It's the day of the rope. So you have it in words, you have it in graphics, you have the guns. Some more examples. I would really go very fast, but let me just show you one. Well, cartoon. Winnie the Pooh, only that this time it's Winnie the Jew, and instead of honey, he's got the money. It's all the old stereotypical presentations of Jews on new platforms. So we see various types of targeting hated groups. It can be Jews, it can be Muslims, it can be gays, it can be women, it can be minorities, it can be Muslims too. And very often, they even use it to glorify those people who already used violence. So in this case, the synagogue shooter in Poway, near San Diego, who killed the Jewish people in the synagogue. And you see also his picture is glorified, is rewarded online. And also the Rahova, which is the nickname, the acronym for the racial holy war that they suggest to launch in the Western world. Very often what we see there is elements taken from Goebbels time, from Nazi propaganda. It can be the classical Jew and Aryan. It can be the classical presentation of the ugly Jew, the stereotypical Jewish, I would say, stories about Jews sucking the blood of young kids. It's all replaying the old propaganda in new platforms. And you can see, if you look at the colors, at the flags at the bottom, you can see the coalition of hate. You can see that many groups are associated, interlinked, from KKK to neo-Nazi, fascist group, racist group, white pride, and so on. Very often, they move to new platforms, some that provide them with better anonymity and better protection, like 8chan, 4chan. These are new online platforms that are not regulated, and the owners are not interested in removing any type of material and are not under any pressure to do so by advertisers or by authorities. Now, recently what we saw, I mean in the last 2 years, how they use, in quite a sophisticated way, how to try to channel the virus, the COVID, for the purposes of psychological warfare, propaganda, and hate. And they certainly use the pandemic in order to target and blame certain groups. Let me show you some examples. And to do so, they use propaganda, spreading fake news, manipulate facts, statistics, and so on. Some extreme examples. How can you use being infected by the virus as a weapon? Believe it or not, they suggest that if you are infected, if you got the virus, what should you do? Visit your local mosque to spread the disease. Visit your local synagogue. It's all online. All these suggestions are online. Go to diverse neighborhoods. It's all the idea of weaponizing the virus. Another online example, cough on your neighbor who is a local minority. So use yourself as a weapon. Promote the panic. Now, the idea that there is an unstable situation, maybe even anarchy, fear, distrust, well, that can be used against the establishment, against the regime, and against certain groups. In this Telegram, another social media platform, they present the coronavirus as presented by the old style, Goebbels style, Jewish faces. And if you put the virus, as they say, under a microscope, this is what you see. The Jews are behind it. So why aren't they? Well, they are certainly presented as a Trojan horse. The COVID pandemic allows them as a Trojan horse to enter the society, the power centers, and take control, and even make profit. So we have the old cartoon, the anti-Semitic style of presenting an old, fat, ugly Jew who's making money smoking his cigar while using the pandemic as a source of income. And it's not just money, it's also to take control of the world power. We see the old style cartoons from Nazi regime translated and renovated and reformed into today's day campaign of coronavirus and the Jews behind it. Even relating it to the denial of the Holocaust propaganda. Now, it's not all about Jews, of course. It's the coalition of hate, as I said. So why not blame the Chinese too? Remember Winnie the Pooh some slides ago. Now we have Winnie the Flu. Only that this time, this is the Chinese face and the target for the hate. And if you look at who are on the hate group, this was posted on March 2020. It's the leftists, the liberals, the globalists, everybody there who's not like us. So we hate all others who are not like us. One example that I want to show you, and I will show you a short video, I hope it works, is about a group, scary one, called Atomwaffen, which means a nuclear weapon in German. And this group, active in North America and in Europe, well known, well established on social media platform, is not just preaching for violence, not just training people for violence, but some of the operatives were convicted for real murders. So let's look at a short video about this group. Okay, here it comes.
Independent nonprofit investigative news source ProPublica has obtained the chat logs written by members of Atomwaffen, a notorious white supremacist group. The group reportedly was combat training in Death Valley in late January. The neo-Nazi extremists allegedly are connected to various deaths throughout the United States. Encrypted logs obtained by ProPublica, some 250,000 messages spanning more than 6 months, offer a rare window into Atomwaffen division that goes well beyond what has surfaced elsewhere about a group whose members have been implicated in a string of violent crimes. The group's propaganda makes clear that Atomwaffen, the word means nuclear weapons in German, embraces Third Reich ideology and preaches hatred of minorities, gays, and Jews. Atomwaffen produces YouTube videos showing members firing weapons and has filmed members burning the U.S. Constitution and setting fire to the American flag. The chat logs and other material obtained by ProPublica provide unusually extensive information about the group's leaders, wider makeup, and potential targets, indicating the group may have as many as 20 cells around the country. Small groups of intermediate size in Texas, Virginia, Washington, Nevada, and elsewhere. Members armed with assault rifles and other guns have taken part in weapons training in various locations over the last 2 years, including in...
Well, this was just an example. Let's go back. So, too far. Atomwaffen is just one example of those groups that are active online, but also offline, and are not just preaching for violence, but also are doing it in North America and in Europe. Now, interesting new switch is the way they are using the darknet. I won't have time to go very deep into the issue of darknet, but the darknet is the deepest layer of the deep net, which is almost inaccessible to us unless people let us in. Now, far-right extremists are moving there because they need protection, they want to keep their material, they want to communicate safely, and they do it in the darknet. So they move the virtual libraries there, they buy and sell weapons and memorabilia over there. They raise funds using, for example, Bitcoin. They coordinate their actions. They communicate among themselves. All of this is done very deep in the net, in what is called the darknet. And recently, we even saw that they are moving some of the material there. After the Charlottesville protest, the events there, the violent events, the website called the Daily Stürmer was removed. So they decided to move it to the darknet and even announced it on various social media platforms. So they can let and give access, give the key to those people they want to, and open the gates to the material in the darknet only to selected audiences. And you can see that they are also posting information how to get them. Now, the question is, of course, if you see so many examples, does it really matter? Does it have any impact? Because it's not just content. We want to know whether the audiences are affected. Does it have any impact? Now, the notion that words kill are very realistic, even in the case of far-right extremism. And we have, I regret to say, many examples to prove it. If we look at the recent attacks, and there are many of them, almost on a weekly basis, on synagogues, on mosques, on demonstrations, we see that those people who attacked those institutions left their footprints in cyberspace. We can find them, including this attacker who killed 11 old Jews praying in a synagogue on Saturday in Pittsburgh. All of these shooters left their footprints in cyberspace, what I mean by that is that we could trace the activity online, the communication, the material they downloaded, the way they were radicalized, sometimes even trained, and very often even launched to action by online messages. This case in Germany, the well-known case in Halle, when an attacker tried to break into a Jewish synagogue and kill people, he was armed, he had a camera on the helmet, and he actually streamed live his actions. He tried to break into the synagogue and failed, and out of frustration, I guess, he started shooting people outside in the street, killing 2 German citizens near the hospital, near the synagogue. Again, all was live streamed online. The man was known, identified in social media, and affected by those seductive materials. And we can go from one case to another. In all of them, people are recruited, people are activated, and later are glorified and rewarded by online contents. It's not just Jews, of course. We can see many cases of Muslims, Muslim communities being targeted and even attacked. Remember the case in New Zealand, the guy who attacked 2 mosques, killing 51 innocent Muslims praying in the mosques. And it was all planned online. He planned the action. 2 years before. These are his words, the way he described, the attacker presented his plan for the attack. And then using a camera and online connection, he just live streamed the attack. I won't show you the videos, they are horrible. These are 2 slides, 2 frames from his videos, documenting the way he killed innocent people, old people, women, children, and people praying in the mosques. Facebook removed 1.5 million videos from this attack, shared all over the social media, and nevertheless, despite Facebook attempt, there are numerous places all over social media where you can find them. One final example that I want to share with you was our recent research on TikTok. When we did start our study on hate online, spreading hate online, one of my assistants, a British girl, research assistant, came over and said, Professor Weimann, I have some examples from TikTok. And I said, TikTok? Well, I have children, in my case, grandchildren, playing with TikTok. You know, they're lip singing with videos and so on. How can that be used by hate groups, by far-right extremists? Well, TikTok is the fastest growing platform, social media in the world, especially among young people. Hundreds of millions of children and youngsters are using it. It is supposed to be a very naive, peaceful, musical, performing arts type of platform, but it's not. Since it is not regulated, it's owned by a Chinese company, and it is so popular among young people, various groups found it very useful for their purposes, and that included far-right extremism and terrorism. And we found hundreds of examples. I'll just briefly show you some of them. Some of them come with music, some of them come with songs and videos. Our reports, by the way, and again, if you're interested, we published several studies on TikTok. Our first study, conducted in 2020, was published all over the media with titles like TikTok has a Nazi problem and so on, or TikTok is rife with racist, anti-Semitic material and so on. As a result, TikTok was pressured to react, and they reacted. So in one interview, live interview on BBC, I was confronted with a speaker representing TikTok. And I explained our findings, and that spokesman was reassuring me and said, Professor Weimann, we are aware of the problem. We will remove it all within 1 year. You won't find any of this. So I took his words, and a year later, in 2021, we did the same study again. The same method, looking at the presence of materials like that. And not only we found the same material, but there was an increase of hundreds of percents in the number of postings that included neo-Nazi, fascist, anti-gay, anti-women, diffusion of hate. So we saw videos by neo-Nazis like that. By the way, that's the symbol, the skull of the Atomwaffen that we spoke about. They presented the material on TikTok too. They have various anti-Semitic cartoons presented there, praising Hitler, Nazism, conspiracy theories presented on TikTok, and all targeting very young, very innocent, and very, I would say, naive and gullible audiences. All of this taken from TikTok. No gays, no women, no Jews. Coalition of hate. And even ISIS videos on TikTok. Well, we found 11,200 versions of the same song calling to slaughter Jews on social network TikTok. So to conclude and turn to questions and answers and discussion, it's very clear that the virus of hate is there on social media, on new platforms, and it's not just words. These words are really killing. Thank you. I leave you with on the screen with my email. So if anyone is interested in contacting me, asking for material, directions, information, feel free to do that. Thank you. Vielen Dank. Toda rabba.
Thank you so much, Gabriel, for your presentation, which was in part a bit depressing to watch, but thank you anyway for your work on that. We would have some time to discuss questions, so I would open the floor for anybody who wants to contribute or ask questions about your work. I may start with my observation when we are doing our hate speech research in Germany, talking to journalists, we very often realize that many of them are not really aware of this strategic dimension of hate speech. Many of them are just viewing hate comments on their websites as just emotional outbreaks of individuals and deal with it like that, and very often are surprised to see that much of this is made up propaganda. So there's a lot to do, I think, to raise the awareness, not only in society, but also among people like journalists who would have the capacity to do something about it. But we have some questions. I think Sunye was the first one. Please, Sunye.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for this relevant presentation. I have two thoughts that came up during your presentation that I would like to share. The first one, I was thinking again about how we discussed yesterday the question of how we define hate speech, and seeing your slides and listening to your words just brought back to mind thoughts that I already had during the No Hate project that Martin Emmer was referring to just before. And that is seeing, for example, what you pointed out, that the strategies that these far-right extremist groups are following, for example, attacking their critics. And this is something we struggled also with when we defined hate speech for our project, that because attacking critics, this has a very individual notion, right? I mean, this is, for example, to try and intimidate individual people speaking up against these ideologies, or just trying to share knowledge they have on these groups. And so an individual attack is not really covered by the hate speech definitions, right? So I felt that somehow research, when we try to stick to the definitions, which we should, of course, then we are just able to grasp like one aspect of what you just showed us, right? So sometimes I have the impression that we all know, or we should know, reading like your research, for example, that this is this melange of different strategies. But if we then focus on concepts and our definitions, we can only grasp like one part of it, and this feels kind of frustrating sometimes. This is like one thing that came up to my mind. Also, this how you called it a coalition of hate, right? So the mix of different target groups, for example, anti-women hate, or also this reference to children, right? Which is really a strategy, I guess, to recruit members that are maybe not that can't recruited by these extreme, I don't know, anti-Semitism or or the other ideologies, but maybe because they fear about their children, I don't know. And so this is another example of how sometimes if you have a focused research project, you know that there's much more and it's all related, but it's difficult then to find a good way to combine the concepts you try to work with and the definitions you try to operationalize, and then knowing this coalition, how you called it. So that was kind of my first comment, a bit long, but I also have a second one. And this is, I was thinking how important it is, what you showed to us in two respects. One is the examples of how these old stereotypes are updated, right? And I guess this is really important, for example, for media literacy campaigns and education, because, and this relates to a presentation we will have this afternoon by Ursula. Obviously, some ordinary social media users don't really get some of graphic or hate speech examples using memes, for example, or pictures. So I guess this is really an important thing to point out, how important it is to inform people and make them understand what actually they are seeing, and then also to relate back to the history, right? And the examples, how this is, as you said, not only words or pictures, but it has an impact, right? And then also it also relates to, for example, something we experienced also in our project, that if you have like material you want to train people working for you to annotate or code or identify hate speech in material, right? You need this kind of expert knowledge in parenthesis, right? To understand it and to be able to identify and classify it, right? So this is just something I wanted to highlight, how important it is to go down deep in these dark sides of our internet. So thanks for doing this research.
Thank you. Any questions?
Okay, there are some more questions on the list, and as we do not have that much time, because we want to save some time for discussing the two papers we have on our list for today, I don't know if we can just combine the questions of Elena and Laura. They are the next two on my list. Elena, would you like to start?
Yes, my question is very short and in a way linked to the question that I saw Tegan asked in the Q&A in the chat session. So one observation that you made is that they are using all social medias, but recently they moved a lot on TikTok, they flourish on TikTok or in HM. Do you think that, I mean, in your study, have you seen that this is also due to the changes in content moderation policies from mainstream platforms like Facebook or YouTube, or you didn't include that in any of your research, or you don't think content moderation policies do actually have a big impact? And the question linked to Tegan, what can we do moving forward? Do you think that pressing companies, social media companies, to change their content moderation policies or to dedicate more attention to this is the way forward, or we need something else to address the problem? But thank you very much. Very interesting presentation.
Thank you, Elena. I don't know, Laura, would you like to add your question?
Yes, I have two short questions. First of all, thank you very much for your presentation, which was quite scary in a way. You mentioned that they are migrating to the dark web, and I was wondering if you had a look to what happens there, and if there's a difference in the way the content is presented, because they have different functions. I had this impression. So I was wondering if there were differences also in the way information appears. And a second question, I have been analyzing jihadist propaganda, and it was not that surprising, but interesting to see that they have the same codes. The impression that reality looks like a video game. You show the image where the people had a gun and we have the same vision as him. Or the fact that anyone can take part to the war. This incitement to act, a call to action against the enemy. So my second question would be, do you think that comparing these different extremist groups, their actions, their propaganda, their strategies could be useful to advance and go further to fight these extremisms? And thank you again.
I'll try to be very brief with my answers because there are more questions. First, about darknet migrating within social media, I'll combine the two questions. Since we are monitoring terrorism for over 30 years, we have all the tools to look into new media and monitor changes. And we certainly find that far-right extremists' use of online platform is very dynamic. What I mean by that is that they react to countermeasures. They react to any attempt to regulate, remove them, block them, deplatform them, as it is called. So they prefer to move to certain new platforms, including the darknet. Now, with the darknet, we should note that the darknet has many advantages in terms of secrecy, anonymity, security for the people who are involved there, but it's not that useful if you want to open it for propaganda. If you want to have a huge audience, most of the users won't be able to access it. So they are quite sophisticated in directing people at two-stage. This is what I mean by that. A two-stage process is that they, on social media, will present the link, how to access to people who are interested and communicate with them, and they trust them how to access the darknet. So that they are very sophisticated in using the darknet for certain purposes, coordination of actions, fundraising, training, but not that much for propaganda users. As for social media, they are certainly transforming their presence from certain media to others. Facebook is declining in terms of the use because it's not just because they prefer more popular or newer platforms, but also because some companies, including Facebook and others, are trying to remove their material. Of course, it's quite futile because they can re-emerge within minutes if they want with another posting, but they prefer to move to more secure, what they consider as more secure or more popular or newer versions of platforms like TikTok, which is just a trend. I bet you that within some months or years, we'll see new platforms emerging and they will move there. Finally, the question, what can be done? For that, I need about 1.5 hours to respond. What can be done in the future is usually the question I'm asked after my presentation. Maybe in the next meeting that we will have with this workshop, I can present you with the recommendation, what can be done. But when we speak about what can be done, I think we can differentiate between two types of measures. Ones which I will call certain countermeasures, which will be called offensive, and some that will be called defensive. Now, we are more eager to speak about offensive and say, why don't we deplatform them? Why don't we pressure the social media owners to remove the contents and so on? I will argue that it might be very easy to suggest, but not that easy to implement. And I will highly consider and recommend the use of protective measures. For example, counter campaigns, counter narratives, targeting the same groups that they target and present them with alternative narratives, counter narratives, and so on. We do have some examples. I don't have the time to discuss it now, but we do have, in the case of radicalism and terrorism, we do have several examples of counter campaigns that were tested in experimental designs, trying to immune, especially young people, against the campaigns of hate and violence. More questions, please.
Thank you. I would suggest that Eva and Asaf ask their questions and then we discuss them in common. Eva, you're next on my list.
I think I was the third, if you want to give the
okay,
platform.
So you hand over your word to Asaf, please.
Yeah, I think Leon preceded me, but it's just a short question, so I'll ask it anyway. I wanted to know if in your research you also checked or witnessed expressions of hate speech only in English or in America or in Europe, or if you had a chance to focus also on hate speech expressions in Arabic from extreme Muslim organizations against Israel or Jews.
Thank you for your question. Since we added this project on hate speech to our ongoing project on terrorism, we actually used the methods, the researchers, the know-how, the experience that we accumulated during the last decades. We are monitoring 24 languages, 24 languages. Some of them are not even languages, but dialects. So if you speak about Arabic, as you asked about, we also look at various dialects in Arabic. We usually use coders who are native speakers of the language, because sometimes it's not just the language, it's also the subtext, the text between the lines. And you have to understand the mentality and the background to decode the contents. So the answer is definitely yes. We look at various contents in various languages. And let me add something that may be an addition to the question about language. We also use coding of the new language, the so-called new language, the coded language. Let me give you an example, Asaf, maybe you know it. Maybe if you look at neo-Nazi material and fascist material online, you'll find very frequently that they use the number 88. Do you know why? Okay, because they know that all those robots scanning the net and removing material that will mention Heil Hitler, HH, will remove the content. So they developed a coded language, a secret language that they can decode. 88 stands for HH, Heil Hitler. So whenever they want to secretly but openly present the messages, they use a coded language. One of our publications, and again, if you're interested, let me know. I'll send you the link. I'll send you the paper. It's about the new language, the coded language they used. And we have a new dictionary that we developed to decode the language that they use in order to preach, but nevertheless be more secure from automatic removal by the operators of social media.
Thank you. Now, Eva, your turn.
Okay, thanks. Yes, thank you so much for the presentation. I think it's, well, really eye-opening. And yeah, I was wondering how you've coped with so many decades of this work, how you've coped mentally, and if you have suggestions for researchers in this field, because so I'm a first-year PhD student, and I am part of this project with other PhD students who are also starting, and of course, depending on our lived experiences, some could be more affected than others, but regardless, the topic is so sensitive that it could really take a toll on our mental health. And I'd just be happy to understand if you have suggestions on how to do research in this field, and also specifically if you see even calls for projects paying attention to this aspect of researchers' mental health. Thank you.
Thank you. It's really a sensitive issue. I do live in the darkest parts of the internet. I spend most of my time in places that most people will not like to be. I see stuff that most people would not like to see, and beheadings and neo-Nazi material is just one example. I do worry about my researchers, especially the young ones, since they are supposed to watch the material, code it, download it, archive it. Very often what we do is that we rotate them. So if one guy is monitoring ISIS, after 1 month, he or she will be moved to another group because we don't really want them to be affected, as you are saying. Nevertheless, there are many young people joining our projects, and I think that if you look at the future, one of the suggestions that I will make is for young people not just to do the monitoring of the contents, but also to be involved in countermeasures. How can we fight back in what I call the defensive measures? How can we develop, test, and operate counter campaigns? Who could be the target audiences? What kind of platforms can be used to not to leave the stage open only for the hate speech, but also for the people who fight it, and for people who suggest alternative futures than hate, violence, killing, death, and so on. So future, I guess that one of my advice to future researchers will be to be more involved, not just in studying the contents, but also in testing and applying countermeasures.
Important. I accidentally forgot Leon. He just moved out of my sight on my screen. So Leon, you have our final question, please.
Yes, just a very quick question. Your research, does it contain any findings on how people are funneled towards this darker, more extreme content? The content that you said is not for propaganda purposes, but only shared on the deepest, darkest corners of the internet. Do you have any research tracing how people are led to these places?
Okay, first let me make it clear. Not all the material is on darknet. Most of it is very easily accessible, as I demonstrated. I just opened the website, which is open to all. and has terrible material there. I just showed you, if you go into the website, you'll see what I mean by that. So most of it is open, accessible, and very inviting to large audiences. Now, why would large audiences go there? Some of the material is very attractive at the first sight, even if you are not extremist. If you look at the amount of people who went to see the gruesome, horrible videos presented by ISIS about beheadings, we are attracted to violence, we are attracted to extremism and so on. You know, Stephen King, the author who wrote many popular books and was asked once, how do you explain your popularity? You write about nightmares, you write about people who are shocked and brutalized and people who are attacked and so on. How do you explain that all your books that are so successful are based on fear? He said, the reason that I'm so successful is the same reason that people slow down and watch when they see an accident. We are attracted to the unusual, we are attracted to the violent content, we are attracted to the something that offers us sometimes the scary material. And the same about some of this propaganda. Very often they attract people not because they want to be involved in violence. This is just the first stage. And when we speak about recruitment, I often use, and it's presented in one of my books, the funnel. It's like a process of a funnel. Many people start watching this material. Most of them will not be affected. Only a few of them will go to the narrower part of the funnel. And sometimes this is all they want. They want those people that will become the shooters, the rapists, the killers, the attackers, the people who go and march and kill 5 people on Capitol Hill. It's not the millions of who will watch. There is a selection process. There's a funnel there. By the end of the funnel, some of them will really become the violent actors. So finally, may I thank you all for listening. I know it wasn't easy, certainly not a nice opening for a day. Those of you who are interested, you can certainly find my material online. You can ask for it if you don't find it, and I'll send it. And hopefully, I really hope that we can meet face to face and discuss these things face to face and not in black squares on my screen. Toda, thank you. Vielen Dank.
Thank you, Gabriel. That was great. Thank you also for highlighting at the end the psychological, sociological foundations of the attractive side of this hate. I think that is important for what we're doing here, and looking forward to go the next steps. All the best for your project. And I hand over the floor back to Ido.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you, Gabi, for a very, very enlightening presentation. We're now going to take a short break, and we're going to continue with schedule at 11:25 Israel time, 10:25 European time, with the next presentation by Laura. So enjoy your break.
Thank you.